Okay, let's rock and roll. You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We are the largest non-commercial worldwide internet radio station on the planet. It's Midnight Madness and Changing Reality, the most important things. This is edition 140. The most important things. Did you hear what I said? So you want real reality tonight? I mean, I'm talking real reality. You want the truth? Well, you're going to get the truth tonight. Let me just date stamp this. This is January the 30th, about 2 minutes into the new day, the year of our Lord 2013. And there has been a raging civil war going on among people about what's going on with these aliens and these UFO abductions and these sightings. Millions of people all over the place, millions and millions have said they've been abducted. Something like 500 million, when they poll worldwide, said they have seen UFOs in the sky. Well, I'm going to bring you a guest tonight who's going to give you the true reality. I have searched for 25 years looking for the truth, and somebody that will just tell you straight up and put the pieces to the puzzle together. You want to know about the war in heaven? You want to know about the fall? What are those strange structures on Mars? How our planet got here? Atlantis? You want all the pieces to the puzzle? Well, my guest, who is a teacher, he's an author, he's written numerous books, but most importantly, he's a real disciple of Jesus Christ. Not one of these fake Christians that, smile, praise God, and just don't hardly even talk to you or engage the world around them, sort of in their own little bubble. You know what I'm talking about. I used to be one of those sort of pop Christianity, American Christianity type Christians. Well, my guest tonight is none other than Zen Garcia, author of both Lucifer, the father of Cain, and the sons of God, who we are and why we're here. And so what I wanted to do, Zen, I'm just excited to have you. I'm just really happy to have you. It's just an honor to meet you. I watch all your work. I listen to all your work on YouTube, on Freedom Endeavor, where you put up various clips, hour, sometimes 2 hours, sometimes longer, where you go over all this material. And just thanks for coming tonight. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's an honor to be with you, brother, and it's my pleasure. And these are very important issues, and you're right. There are so many people that are, being set up for what is cited in the Bible as the strong delusion. And that has to do with people being willing to accept these aliens, these ancient aliens, which we know are demons and fallen angels, as their creators and as their benefactors and as the creators of humanity. And so it says that even the most elect could be deceived if it were possible.
Yeah, I mean, we're in this civil war has even spilt over into this station to where we got bitter disagreements among our own host. There seem to be either on one side or the other. But before we go into the fall and everything, this first segment, Zen, because you're such an unusual person, I mean, if it wasn't for you putting the pieces to the puzzle together, I would have like one piece over here and then I'd get this and I couldn't match them. And it wasn't really until I got a hold of your work and started listening to you that I saw the whole matrix. And I kind of wondered why. And so you're just an unusual person. You have an unusual first name, unusual background. So if you can kind of tell the audience where you came from and how you came to be able to get all of this really esoteric, really high knowledge that's literally forbidden. It's very hard to find. It's the biggest secret, so to speak. But can you just say a little bit about your life and what happened to you and, how you had an accident and things changed for you and, where you came from, that type of thing?
Sure, absolutely. Well, when I was going to college and also holding a 9-to-5 job, I found myself always, in a vehicle, traveling from place to place, and then going either into college or into a martial arts studio or into work where I was always behind the walls and, looking out the window. And I got tired of, just doing the normal 9 to 5 kind of thing. So I decided at an early age to hit the road and kind of live in a van for a period of time and to travel and to seek out some spiritual awakening and to seek experiences of the divine, so to speak. So for a period of time, after I published my first book, which was in 1992, that one was called Look Somewhere Different. I decided to travel and to leave and to, move to different places. And I spent 4 years in this van, and I wrote my second and my third book during that period of time while I was seeking out just wisdom and vision questing at different national parks. And during that time, I didn't have a job. I had income coming in from having sold my vehicle. I had a Jeep Wrangler at that time, and I was working a really good job before then, installing telephone networks and computer patch panels and faxes and telexes and things like that for my father, who had a company that he wanted me to basically take over, but that wasn't
Were you Zen? Were you a Christian at the time?
No, no, I wasn't.
Okay,
I was
okay, go ahead.
more involved in shamanism and the New Age and vision questing and doing things from a completely different perspective. And I was also involved in studying the Sumerian text and Zachariah Sitchin's work and a lot of what was coming out, Barbara Messiniak and Bringers of the Dawn, Red Elk, all the different, like Hopi prophecies and things like that. Because back in the early 90s, there was a flood of information that was coming forth, and I basically was seeking, and I wanted to know, so I was consuming everything, same as I did when the Father finally did bring me to the Scriptures, and I study everything voraciously and read everything because I feel like with truth, it's like being a criminal investigator. You have to study all of the pieces, those things which you even consider irrelevant and maybe not seemingly connected to the case, but that might be important later. And so I see truth as a big jigsaw puzzle that needs to be filled in with certain pieces, and that once you get enough of the pieces, you can kind of see the underlying truth and the picture that is veiled, and then you get a discernment, and it helps you to decipher the illusion, so to speak, and to see through the matrix. But so for the first few years, I was traveling around. I taught martial arts, and so I would stop in different dojos and studios wherever I went to train with the people and to also teach them. And I was studying under a guy named Charles Fears, who was the bodyguard for Emmanuel Lewis, the Little Webster, the guy Little Webster on TV. But anyways, he had two bodyguards, Charles Fears and Vernon Davis, and both of them were my trainers. And then when I went out to the West Coast, I started to get involved in snowboarding, and so I started to teach snowboarding and martial arts, and then I got involved with the Gracie brothers before the time of the Ultimate Fighting Championships and all that came out. And so my focus was writing poetry, teaching martial arts, and also just snowboarding. And so I ended up spending my winters in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which was an incredibly beautiful place and very inspirational. And it was during the time of all these travels and spending this 4 years, living out of this van and going to different places that I really got grounded with being alone and being with spirit. And I didn't at that time have, a job that I needed to be at, or I didn't have, this was before cell phones, there was actually beepers there during that time, but I didn't carry one of those. And nobody knew where I was at, and I would always call in and check in with my parents and let them know where I was and how to, where I was going, so that they could feel more comfortable and not be fearful for my travels. But after a while, they became comfortable with what I was doing. But during the course of my travels, after I published my second book, When the Evening Dies, which is a poetry book about all of my travels and my spiritual journeys during that time. It was in 1994 that I was going to a massage school. Actually, it was a healing arts school in Northern California in Garberville called the Heartwood Institute for Healing Arts. And this place was really kind of just a bunch of hippies that had decided to start a school, and they were teaching all of their different expertise. And one of those was Swedish Echelon, deep tissue, polarity, and shiatsu. And so I became involved with doing massage as well. And that was one of the things that I would also do to supplement my income as far as teaching martial arts and snowboarding and all these things. And then while I was at that school, it was we were going to San Francisco because Garberville's 200 miles north of San Francisco, and I was actually hitchhiking with a friend down to San Francisco. We were going to actually go visit and watch a Grateful Dead show, visit some friends down there, and go to a series of 3 Grateful Dead shows. And it was during that trip that we lost our brakes on a mountain road and went off a cliff, and luckily somebody was actually spotted us and reported us going off of this cliff. And so the emergency workers came out and saved us. We actually dropped 85 feet. We hit a tree about 65 feet on the way down, and it slowed our impact enough that that we didn't explode on impact. And I don't know how long it was that we were down there. I do remember losing our brakes, and then the guy that was actually driving, he tried to hold the vehicle on the road, which didn't make sense to me. I would have crashed it into the mountain immediately to slow our descent, but he tried to hold it on the road until we shot sideways. We gained enough speed and went around the corner, and he couldn't control the vehicle, and we pretty much shot sideways off of the cliff. And I remember the impact, and I remember trying to get up after the impact and realizing that that I was paralyzed because my body wasn't responding to me the way that it should have. And so it was during that whole time that I spent about 6 months in the hospital recovering from the accident and the injury, and they actually had to do exploratory surgery on me because I had my spleen burst within me, and I was, holding a bunch of blood and bleeding to death internally. But they were able to save all of us, and nobody actually died from the wreck. The driver, he had a brain injury, and it affected him quite a bit. But I think I was the most affected, and I only broke one bone in my body, but it happened to be in my neck. And so I became a quadriplegic. And the other 2 people that were in the vehicle, one of the girls, she broke one of her arms and broke her pelvis in two places and broke one of her legs. The other guy had smashed his thumb, and he broke his pelvis in 4 places. And I don't think if he had any other injuries, and so after my accident and my recovery, they flew me back to Atlanta because my parents were living here in Atlanta during the time. And one of the world-renowned spinal cord injury hospitals is based in Atlanta. It's called the Shepherd Spinal Center. And so they flew me there, and for the next 6.5 months, I stayed in that hospital and had to go through the whole process of relearning and, being reborn into the whole strange world of disability. And so that was a whole difficult situation. It was something that I don't on anybody, of course.
Right. Well, let me get this straight, Zen. So here you are, a young man. You're moving around. We all remember back in the '60s and '70s. If you're my age, there was lots of people like that. They were free. They floated around, doing all kinds of experience. You were definitely into the flesh. I mean, young, healthy, strong guy, kickboxing, snowboarding. Really enjoying your young body. Before you get too old and realize, I missed that part. And then you had this accident. Are you saying that you were still a quadriplegic?
Oh yeah, I'm still a quadriplegic. Hmm.
Wow, wow. And that's both arms and both legs, correct?
Yes. Well, I can move my arms. I just can't move my hands. I can't move, anything from my chest down. But yeah, I can still use my arms, and that's a huge blessing because it was, after my accident, and once I got out on my own and I went home for 6 months to stay with my parents, and I decided then that I wasn't going to allow them to have to take care of me, and I wanted them to get back to their own lives. And so I got a scholarship to go to college at Mercer University, and so I kind of moved out on my own, and then I got enough assistance to where me and this other guy who was actually a higher level quadriplegic, he was a C4, C5 quadriplegic who couldn't move his arms at all. And I had to actually help him in a lot of things that he did himself, and to assist him in certain ways. And so I realized then, how much of a blessing it was for me to be able to use my arms and to type and to write and to, do all the things that I still have capacity to do. Because my roommate for the next 2 years while I was going to college in Macon, Georgia, is where Mercer University is, and so I lived with him, and I saw how he had to really do everything with basically a mouse stick. He, had to type with a mouse stick. He used the phone. He would flip the light switches on and off with his mouse stick. And so I realized really how blessed I was, and I never got into a mindset of, where I was just feeling sorry and for myself, even though I could have done that. I mean, it's easy, you have every reason to do that, but I decided the best thing for me to do then was to start work on my next book, because there was a 6-year sabbatical between the publication of my second book, When the Evening Dies, and my third book, which is called A Different Way of Being. And that book is, about my transition into disability and my whole I began a new spiritual journey, and after that, and I began to study the Word and to go into all of the extra biblical books, the Book of Enoch, and different pseudepigraphal, apocryphal, Dead Sea Scroll, the Nag Hammadi codices, all the things that were tied to Christianity, which was strange for me because I had turned my back on it a long time ago, but here it was that. And I had already, had a strong relationship with what I call the Father, the Most High, the Creator of us all. But I didn't know His Son in any way, not the way that I know Him now. And so He led me during the course of writing my third book. He led me into the study of the Word and Scripture, and so I went into it with a new mindset, a new perspective, and then I realized that once I started to read it, that what I was reading was not being taught in the mainstream churches, and a lot of things that was being revealed to me, nobody was talking about, especially. And so that's when I decided, after the publication of my third book, A Different Way of Being, which occurred in 2004, I decided to write my fourth book, Lucifer, Father of Cain. And that was because I kept having the pieces of this information, and I found it everywhere, scattered everywhere in the text, and nobody was speaking about it. And everybody, there were a few people that, were teaching about this, but I didn't know them and I hadn't studied any of their work. This was something that was new to me and that nobody else was speaking about, and I considered it a skeleton key for unlocking so much of what is veiled within the text, and that's really what it is. And so I published that book in 2010 in April on my son's birthday, and I got so much criticism for the publication of that book, and I was called a heretic, and I was harassed. I was ostracized by what I considered, some of the church leaders. I tried to reach out to everybody to do interviews to bring forward this information. And what I realized is that the world was hostile to it and that it was being hidden, obviously to me, for ulterior motive. And there was a greater force working against this information getting out to people. And I didn't yet understand it at the time. But I was, with this book, really, I was unlocking and unfolding what was the truth behind Matthew chapter 13 and the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. And basically what is going on with a continuation of the war in heaven, which is occurring right here on this planet. And so
Okay, Zen. Well, on the next segment, we're going to have a break coming up in just 3 or 4 minutes, and then I want to get into, if you can kind of take us from the beginning, just a thumbnail sketch, the beginning, the war in heaven, what you think happened, and then, take us on down, basically how the earth came to be in this position, how old this planet is, talk about, when Adam and Eve came to this earth, it was more or less to replenish it, but there was other civilizations and cities, and take us through that. But I did want to ask you, can you point us in a direction to where we can get your information? I got about 6 or 7 different sites that Tones put up here, but what is the best way? I know we can get your book through Amazon, but sometimes if you go direct, you get a better it's a better deal. So how can we get a hold of you? I know about the on YouTube, the Endeavor Freedom TV, Fallen Angels TV, Blog Talk on blogtalk.com. But any other websites or anything else that you want to say? How they can get a hold of you? Go ahead.
Well, sure. I run a disability website called endeavorfreedom.tv. That's not the best site to catch me. Fallenangels.tv is where most of my work is, and there's also links to get my book there. My fourth and my fifth book is called Awaken to the New World Order, and both of those books were published through Lulu, Lulu, .com. But you can find my third through my sixth book on Amazon. My sixth book, Sons of God, Who We Are, Why We're Here, it was actually picked up and released by Tate Publishing, and I'm now a contracted author through them, and so all my works will be coming out through Tate Publishing from now on. But you can find it on Amazon, and those were the 2 main sites, Tate Publishing and Lulu.com. But all my books are available on Amazon.
Yeah, thanks so much. And so, Zen, just one thing, I do want to confirm what Zen's saying. I've lived in, people know a little bit about my life. I've lived in a dozen different states, and I have been to well over 100 different churches. And I'm talking Pentecostal, I'm talking West Virginia Holy Roller, where, they smack you on the forehead in the name of Jesus. I've been to Catholic churches, Baptist churches, Lutheran. I don't think I can think of a church that I have not been to, and never, ever to have heard anything about Cain and where Lucifer is the father of Cain. And it's all laid out. We don't really need to do the heavy scriptures tonight, Zen, to back it up. If you can kind of take them through, hit the highlights. So, okay, you're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We are listener supported. Everybody out there knows what that means. We don't take sponsors. That's why we can do 28 minutes of talk in a segment and really flesh out in depth what we go through. Also, we're not tied to what corporations want us to talk about, which makes our station so unique, so cutting edge, and how you have such a diverse group of hosts all over the place that push the envelope everywhere. It is Midnight Madness, changing reality, the most important things. My guest is Zen Garcia, who is an author, a teacher, and we were talking about basically the beginning when the war started in heaven. I do want to say, Zen, that I am impressed. I looked at the ratings that were up, and we're right behind like George Norrie and Dennis Miller, in between them and Glenn Beck and Sean Hannity. So, I mean, we're like in the top 10. That's very impressive. It's kind of record-shattering, actually. So, I want to kind of take it through the top in this segment, Zen. And if you can kind of, everybody they want to know where we're from, why we're here. If you can kind of give an overlay on right from the beginning. I know you talk about that in the beginning, that God actually created spirits, conscious beings, angels, if you want to call it that, and that we sat in darkness just a little while, and we were actually created before the universe, if I got you right. And then once light was revealed, then all of these different races of angels had different types of jobs. You talk about the Morning Star administration. But anyways, if you can take us from the top, Zen, and just kind of race us through, if you're able to do it, take your time. But, people really want to know, where did we come from? What's this all about? But go ahead.
Okay, sure. Well, it all goes back to there really is no beginning. We've been here as part of eternity, as part of the great mystery, ever since the Creator has thought things into being. And there is no beginning, there is no end, as scientists talk about how energy can't be, destroyed, and how it just transforms. It's the same kind of thing. And as far as explaining the fall, I have to also explain the three world ages, because the three world ages have everything to do with our having pre-existed as part of the sons of God, as part of the Elohim. And when we are born into the flesh, we drink from the cup of forgetfulness and we forget about these memories. But we do have indwelling within us memories that go back to the connection and that hold the accounting of everything that has occurred since even that first initial separation of light and darkness, and what later became the war, the rebellion. And just to explain this as well, I'm going to explain this from a biblical account just so people can understand it, but it will tie in all of the mythologies and the full summation of everything that's been taught as far as mythology and religions, even the Sumerian texts, because, like I said, you have to study all the pieces of the puzzle in order for you to be able to see the underlying truth. And so what happened with the initial calling forth of the light, it says in Genesis, let there be light. The Father said, let there be light. Well, what people don't realize is that that initial calling forth of the light is when Christ, Yahuah, was called into being, and he was the light of the universe. He was the original morning star. And he was given dominion of creation. It says in a book called the Book of the Bee that there was a momentary pause where everybody, the sons of God, the Elohim, we sat in darkness. We thought ourselves to be pre-existing beings, and then we became witness to the calling forth of this light, and this light is Christ. And it wasn't until that moment that the creation became visible. In the book of Job, it cites how all of the sons of God shouted for joy at the revealing of the morning star. This is when the creation became visible. This is also the instance where Lucifer contrived envy in his heart. He was the first created archangel, even before Michael and Raphael. It cites this in a book called The Gospel of Nicodemus, actually the Gospel of Barnabas. All these quotations are in my book. I'm not going to read from any of them, but I'll tell you where they are. And so when Christ was revealed and given dominion, that's when Lucifer wanted to be as the Most High, and he led a rebellion. And the Father and the Son, they allowed him to lead this rebellion because they wanted to also to test their angels and to test their loyalties and their allegiances. So Lucifer led this rebellion. He tempted 1/3 of the angels, and it says that 1/3 fell from every class, but the predominant class that fell with them was an angel called the seraphim. And the seraphim angels are the dragon-like reptilian shape-shifting angels that everybody calls the Draco reptilians or the dragon-like beings. It's the same thing as the Nakash that is cited in Genesis chapter 3 as being the serpent that seduced Eve. Lucifer was transformed also into one of these beings. And so when this war in heaven occurred, it says in the book of Enoch that Lucifer was cast out of the heavens on the second day. And so from the second day to the sixth day, he and his angels, they were out creating in the universe. And it cites in Ezekiel chapter 28 how it was that they established an interplanetary economic system which spread, through this solar system. And he had as his main base a planet called Maldek, a planet called Rahab or Tiamat. And it was this planet that used to inhabit the space between Mars and Jupiter, where the asteroid belt now is. The Father allowed, this is cited in the Enuma Elish and all of the old Babylonian, Akkadian, the epic creation stories. It speaks about the early reformation of our solar system. This is also cited in Genesis as being the tohu and vohu, or where the creation was made null and void. And this is also cited in Jeremiah chapter 4:23 as being the destruction of the first world age. And so
wait a minute, Zen. What people have to understand is that between the second day and the fourth day, you're not talking about a normal 24-hour day. We're talking about ages, right? Can you qualify?
Yes, and this is even when the earth was recreated from Tiamat, we're talking 450,000 years according to what the Sumerian texts cite. And so going from the second day to the sixth day could be millions of years. We don't have an accounting of exactly what that time period is, but we know it's a long period of time. And it was during this period that the civilizations on Mars and even the different structures that are on the moon were created. And there's structures found on a lot of the different planets that we don't realize because these fallen angels, they were creating, they were molding and shaping and reforming within this solar system, and they were ruling as gods themselves. And so it was the Lord allowed the planet Nibiru to become part of this solar system. And when it was captured by what is cited as the net force or the gravity of the outer planets, it was brought into conflict with this planet Tiamat. And one of the moons of Nibiru actually split her asunder and cut her in half and created the devastation that was where the asteroid belt is now. And so Maldek, or as called Rahab in Job, this is where this planet was destroyed, and this is cited as also in Peter as the destruction of the first world age. And so that planet where Lucifer had his base, and he was controlling this economic system, that planet was judged and destroyed. And judgment has been incurred upon the fallen angels many times over a long period of time. And so it was the carcass that was Tiamat that later shifted places with the planet Mars and became known as the new planet Ki, as cited by the Sumerians. And this is the new Earth. And the Enuma Elish is citing this tohu vohu, or when, as Genesis says, when the first world age became null and void. And this is also, it was during this particular cataclysm that the atmosphere on Mars, which used to be where the Earth is now, and it was a very hospitable planet. It was a planet of huge occupation, and there was, there's many cities and many structures that are still even on Mars, and you can, NASA has pictures of these different things and is currently hiding them and keeping them quiet. But there's been enough release that we have confirmation on this as well. And it also speaks about how it was that the atmosphere, what little atmosphere that was on the moon, was also destroyed. And this became the focus. Earth became the focus, and the new, because it was placed at the perfect place to then begin the multiplicity and multiplication of life here on this planet. And that is what brought focus to this particular planet.
And so that would be the first world age, Zen, the second to the fourth day. Is that the first?
Second to the fourth day, to the sixth day, actually, because the
sixth
second
day, yeah,
didn't begin until Adam and Eve were created. And I'd have to go through a little bit of what occurred during the time of Atlantis to lead up to that story of why it was that Adam and Eve were brought into being 7,000 years ago.
Yeah, but when people want to know about that and all these megaliths, I mean, huge 300-ton blocks that our cranes can't even lift. There's incredible stone structures under the oceans, and none of it we've been given a good explanation for. But anyways, go ahead about Atlantis.
Okay, well, we'll have to go a little bit before Atlantis to set up the whole premise. This is 457,000 years ago. It cites that the Elohim, or the Anunnaki, the ancient aliens, fallen angels, whatever you want to call them, they inhabited and were living on a planet Nibiru. What became the 12th planet. It was now caught in this solar system, and it had an orbit that went contrary to all of the other planets, and it would cross. It was called the planet of the crossing. It would cross where the asteroid belt is now, and it had 3,600, according to the Sumerian text again, had a 3,600 orbit, and it was called a shar. But the Anunnaki say that they came to the planet 10 shars ago, and that if you add it all up, it's 432,000 years. And so the reason that they came here is because they were undergoing cataclysmic destruction on their own planet, much like global warming. And every time they came close to what is called the Apsu, which is the sun, in their orbital proximity to the sun, they would undergo great upheavals on their own planet. And their own creatures and their way of life, they would undergo great devastation. And so these Anunnaki, who have been around for a long time, they had their scientists come together and to create a plan for protecting the planet. And the best thing that they could think to do was to gather gold and to crush it into a powder form and to suspend it within their atmosphere so that it would protect from the harsh rays of the sun, the gamma rays, the X-rays, and to protect the creatures and the life of their planet. And so there was also, struggles and wars on their own planet. And what was a king, an exiled king, a Nuberian king called Alalu, he was the first one. He left his planet and came in a shuttle and actually utilized weapons of mass destruction to break through the asteroid belt, which was a protective barrier and had, until that time, kept the Anunnaki from being able to explore the inner planets. They had access to the outer planets after the destruction of the First World Age, but they could not get to the inner planets. And so he was the first one to break through. He came here to the Earth with specific mission. He knew that because in the Anunnakis, in their own annuals and in their own mythology, they knew that when Tiamat was destroyed, that there was much gold in not only the asteroid belt, but also in what was the remnants of her carcass, which became the Earth. And so he came here for specific reason to locate that particular gold. And so he came here and indeed did find it, and then he sent message back to Nibiru that he had their salvation, that he had found a way to this other planet, he had located gold, and that if he wanted them to reinstate him as king. And so what then happened is that another group of 50 Anunnaki were sent to come to this planet to confirm his claim. And one of the ones that came was Ea, the prince Ea. And he's the one that we know as Satan or Samael. And I'll go into that a little bit later. But he came with a group of 50 and did indeed confirm that gold was here. And then they established what was the first base on this planet called Eridu, a home in the faraway. And they began to drain to create the first civilization and to build up megalithic type cities and structures here on this planet. And they did so to get the gold. Well, after Ea and this group of 50 had come here, there was another Nuberian prince named Enlil who was sent here to this planet. And I want to clarify this real quick because a lot of people think that Enlil is Yahweh of the Old Testament, but they're confused on this. When Enlil came here to this particular planet, they drew straws. His father, Enlil, and Ea, they drew straws to see who would rule what and who would manage what. And so Anu, the father, he retained his seat of kingship on Nibiru, and Enlil, who we know as Zeus, Enlil is Zeus according to the Greek and Roman pantheon. Enlil took over Eridu. They drew straws, and he was to become head of the Mediterranean, that particular part and area. And Ea, who then became known as Enki, he moved down to South Africa, to the African continent, and he established the Abzu. And that's when mining began, and he became head of that particular mining operation. And Ea is also known as Oannes, and he's the person that we come to know as Poseidon. And so Yahweh is not Enlil. Enlil is Zeus, and Ea or Enki is his brother Poseidon. And they're both from the same pantheon of gods.
Right, and yes, Zen, and what we're talking about, we're actually talking about a flesh and blood ancient, high-tech, demonic race. Are we talking that type of being?
Yes. Yes, because
Yep.
they are now in flesh form, even though they are seemingly immortal because they do have long lifespans. They still eat, drink, have to sleep, they dream, and they defecate, same as humanity. They're like spirit men. And this happened also with Atlantis, which I'll get into that here in a short bit. But I just want to explain this a little bit more. And so Enki and Enlil, they were contesting also for who would be king later, after Anu passed away or whenever. And so there was a rule of succession that had been established on Nibiru where if you married a half sister, then your progeny would become greater in rank and have the divine right to rule more so than somebody that had produced seed from a concubine or somebody that was not of a half sister. And so they began to contest for who was called Ninhursag, and she was one of the first females to come here to this planet. And they contested in love with her, and there was a division. There was a war between these two particular clans, and that war is spoken about also in going fast forwarding a little bit, going to the time of Atlantis. It was during the time of Atlantis, according to the Emerald Tablets, that the sons of darkness, or the sons of Belial, the sons of the serpent, the sons of the dragon, they began to open stargates and invite dark entities into this plane of existence. And when they did that, the creator, the father of us all, he then decided to judge the Anunnaki, the fallen ones, just as he had when he destroyed Tiamat, Maldek, or Rahab. He decided to judge again their involvement with evil, and they're opening these stargates, and they're getting involved in black magic. This was also the time that they attempted what was the New World Order, the first attempt at establishing global domination, global dominion. And it was also during their first initial stay, and this is before the creation of modern humanity, that they tried to create a slave race called the primitive worker, or the Lulu. And this is given, there's detailed accounts as to how they went through genetic experimentations and how they engaged in direct bestiality to bring this particular, it was a Bigfoot type creature, like a Cro-Magnon, Neanderthal type. And it was this creature that they experimented upon and that they manipulated to bring forth what would be a slave race, one that could handle serving them in menial tasks. And this particular creature did not have a language and did not have the capacity to domesticate animals or to work the field in agriculture. It was just barely able to do certain things. Well, the Anunnaki also interbred with this particular creature, and they established then their own priesthood and their own bloodlines. And, it was during that time that these coneheads, these weird type hybrid beings came into being. And this is still before the modern creation of Adam and Eve, which was a judgment against them. The Father created his own special creature as a judgment against them for their involvement in trying to create a slave race. And this is cited in Genesis 1 because there's two different creatures and two different creations spoken about. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 5, it talks about how there was no man yet to till the ground, and how the face of the earth was, watered. And so and the Sumerian texts also cite this new creature, or Adam and Eve, as being called the civilized man. And it cites in the text how it was a wonder that this particular creature had come about so quickly and evolved to such a degree
So
that
let me
could,
get this right, Zen. Right now we're at Atlantis. They're engaged in high immorality, um, uh, idol worship, um, opening up stargates, working with black magic, um, and they're trying to create a slave class worker.
yeah,
Um, and they mess around with I guess some apes or whatever, and they get the Cro-Magnon man, they get the Neanderthal, maybe even Bigfoot is might be part of that.
even
Um, and so then what happens from Atlantis? What happens? Is there another great destruction? Is that the close of the Second World Age?
yes, no, the Second World Age hasn't happened yet. This is still part of the First World Age. This is going to be the second judgment of the First World Age, but this is going to occur here on this particular planet. The first great destruction, which is cited in the Enuma Elish, was the destruction of Tiamat and the recreation of the earth. And that's cited as the Tohu Vohu, where, in Genesis, where the earth became null and void. This is also cited in the Colburn Bible, but all these quotations and passages are in my book. I verify all these things with.
Yeah, and if you could, Zen, just before we go to break, which is about 30 seconds, give us your website one more time, and then we're going to go to the break, and then afterward we'll pick it up at Atlantis.
Sure, fallenangels.tv.
Okay, welcome back to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Normally I go through the 5 different ways that you can support us, but let's just do it the easy way tonight. Just go to freedomslips.com and just hit the donate button. Especially during my show, Nighthawk says that he gets, near upwards of 40% of the support for the station from my show and my audience, and that I much appreciate. But I'm not going to go through all the different ways. You guys know the song and dance because I got such an important guest, Zen Garcia, who's written the book Sons of God. Now, what you're hearing, and I know what you all are thinking out there, because I know this station, I know the audience, you all heard bits and pieces of Nibiru, Enki, ancient civilizations in South Africa, Adam's clock, megaliths. You've heard all these bits and pieces. Well, Zen is speeding through it really at light speed. This doesn't do it justice. Really, what you need to do is buy his book. I mean, it's worth it. It's Sons of God. I mean, that he goes through he just lays it right out. It's just mind blowing. It's opening. So what he's done is he's actually sped through his book at light speed, and it really doesn't do it service. So if you want the details, and he comes up with these names, and Lulu. Most people don't even know what a Lulu is. I mean, it's just a lot of strange stuff that you heard at different places. He pulls all the pieces of the puzzle together in that book, and he lays it out. So right now, he went from the awakening in heaven to that there was a war. He wasn't able to touch on the Morning Star administration office, basically the serpentine race of angels, which were pretty much the administrators, and how Lucifer rebelled when they realized that Jesus was going to be the actual ruler of the universe. But anyways, he sped through all that. We are now down to Atlantis, and this is actually on the earth, and we're getting ready to go into another judgment because of what they did in Atlantis. In some kind of Indian writings, and I know Zen will know what I'm talking about. I don't even know the text, but they talk about Vimanas. They talk about some type of nuclear exchange. There's even places in India where sands still radiate, deserts. But anyways, we're right at that judgment. And so anyways, then go ahead and continue from Atlantis, where you were at. Go ahead.
Okay, sure. As I was saying, they had attempted the first establishment of what was the New World Order. And this is cited by Plato in a passage called Critias and also another passage called Timaeus, where he speaks about how they went to war even against the Spartans and the Greeks and all of the different other cultures and other peoples of the world, and how they were trying to establish this global domination. And they had brought up their particular primitive worker, their Lulu type person, to a certain degree of progress, but it was still not something that could, that was very, very smart and able to handling high intellectual capacity. They were the ones that had all the high technology, and it was through their hybrid breeding into these primitive lines. And this is cited by Berosus. Berosus, one of the Chaldean historian, in a book called Polyhistor. He talks about all the hybrid creatures and the different hippocentaurs, even the unicorn, how there were, men that were half animal, half creature. And so all these different hybrid types of creatures and beings came into play during this particular time. And that was also another reason why judgment was brought upon them. And
right, Zen. Just for the record, they were master genetics manipulators, right? I mean, they were really into just crossing everything. I mean, going against the natural order of everything. Katie bar the door. It didn't matter, right?
Right. It says in the Book of Giants how they were a word called miscegenation, and how they had corrupted not only the animals but also the plants in whatever way it was that they had corrupted them. Maybe like GMOs, like we're doing now, crossing plants with animal cells and different types of things like that. But they corrupted the whole earth. And so they were going to be judged for this. It also speaks about how it was that this particular creature was treated like an economic commodity and had no rights. And, they'd use them for sacrifice to feed, because they feed on human flesh. They drink the blood of humanity. They're cannibals. They eat the flesh of humanity as well. And so this was also one of the things that became an abomination. And so the Lord, the Father, and this is spoken about as the second creature, the second creation, the one that was given the breath of life. This Adam, this is the beginning of the second world age. The Father created Adam and took him into paradise, which was a protective enclosure. And it was Ea, Enki, who we know as Samael, the feathered serpent, or the Nakash, that decided to take revenge against Yahushua for kicking him out of heaven on the second day. And he decided he was going to deceive and tempt this new creature and cause their fall. And so he did that. He snuck into paradise and entered as the feathered serpent, and he tricked and seduced Eve. And Eve was the wife of Adam, and they were angelic, immortal, bright-natured beings before the fall. And the eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil that opened their eyes, this particular, which was not a fruit, it was whatever it was, this initial thing, it caused them to lose their bright natures. It caused them to lose their immortality and to have to incarnate on this planet, the wilderness of the earth, in a place called the Garden of Eden. And it was after their incarnating into the flesh, which happened on the 8th day. The fall occurred on the 6th day. On the 7th day, there was a day of rest, a day of atonement. And then on the 8th day, their bodies were transformed into flesh. And it was after they were transformed into flesh that the prophecies of Genesis chapter 3 became fulfilled, namely that Eve was raped by the Archon. She was impregnated with Cain, who became the first of the seed line, the hybrid seed line of this particular, the Anunnaki or the feathered serpent. They're called the tares in Matthew chapter 13. And that's why it is also cited in Genesis chapter 3:15 by the Father that he would put enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. And so most people don't realize the profoundness of that statement, nor do they realize that Satan actually has a seed line on this particular planet. And we know that seed line today as the 13 Illuminati bloodlines, but most people don't realize that this occurred in the garden with the fall and Eve's impregnation with Cain, who became the first hybrid child. And that's also why, and this is the beginning of the Second World Age with the recreation of Adam and Eve. And their fall, it began all of our incarnation into the flesh. And it's the sons of God, us as part of the Elohim, as part of the Morning Star administration, who are now incarnating into the flesh. We are sort of like fallen angels, but we're not like the rebel angels, the fallen angels that rebelled against the Father, that have no part in salvation. But we are spiritual beings who now find ourselves in flesh form. And so that's part of, the judgment that came upon all of us and why it is that we find ourselves in the flesh now. And
so let me get this straight, Zen. So what you're saying basically is that all of us, as conscious beings, unlike deer or a worm or whatever, we know we're different. We're conscious beings. You're saying we go all the way back, and that there was this war. A third of the angels went into full-scale war, rebellion. Are you saying that we're part of maybe another third that, unlike Michael or Gabriel, who fought back, some angels fought back against them? Are you saying that we actually did something wrong, that we didn't choose good or evil? We didn't use our free will and decide to side with the Father and the Son, but we didn't fight against them either, and that we sort of, and that this is kind of our punishment, so to speak, is to be incarnated in the flesh. Is that the implication?
It's both. It's not one shoe fits all, because we are from all three classes of angels, and the Father, Yahuah speaks about this in when he gives speaks to the seven churches. He talks about, remember where you have fallen from, remember your first estate, and do those works. There are some, it says also in the text that the first will be the last and the last will be first. What this is speaking about is the elect angels that were part of the First World Age, that sided with Michael and sided with the Father and the Son and the Morning Star administration in fighting against the war against Lucifer and his seraphim angels. And these are, yes, the elect angels that find themselves in embodiment now. Most of us, however, are from the Ophanim angels, which were led by Gabriel, that are like the Laodicean church of today, that did not make one decision. They're lukewarm. They were not hot or neither cold. They couldn't make a decision during that time, because what you have to realize also is that Lucifer was the first archangel. He was given great authority. He was the most beautiful angel. He had great appeal. He had, flowery metaphors and eloquent words in order to seduce the angels. And his seduction was so great that 1/3 of the totality of the Father and the Son's angels rebelled and sided with him. That's how great his appeal was. But some of the people here, the tares, the children of Cain, are from that particular line and are part of that rebellion. And yes, incarnating into the flesh is both a reward and a punishment, because it's in the flesh that we are redetermining our allegiance to one of two masters. That those that are the wheat, that are the elect, that are the remnant, that will inherit the rewards of righteousness in paradise, they serve the Father and the Son, and they know who their Lord is. Those that, because there's a lot of them that serve Lucifer and that serve the Freemasons, serve the Babylonian Catholic Church, as far as, those that still worship Dogon and the pantheon of the fallen angels, Osiris, Baal, and Ashtaroth, which is part of, the Mary worship is the worship of Ashtaroth. And all these things are spoken about in the Bible. But those people that worship idolatry and worship the fallen angels as the pantheon of whatever gods, because most of the nations of the world do worship a multiple pantheon of gods. And it is these fallen angels that are those pantheons. And so you have to realize what it is you are involved in and what it is you are, who it is you are worshiping, because we're worshiping one of two masters. And we're here, even though we have predestination, we have pre-election, and we have pre-existence, we still are determining with our every thought, action, and deed whether we deserve to be part of those that are saved. When the judgment comes and the separation happens and the harvest occurs and the wheat and the tares, the goats and the sheep, the left and the right are separated. And that day is coming quickly. We're the fig tree generation. So
we're really here right now. It seems that free will keeps popping up. It seems like we didn't make a decision before, whether good or evil, whether to fight back or to join a rebellion. We kind of just sat on our rear ends like most of us do and just like watch football. We don't get involved. Seems like it's endemic with human beings. And so you're saying that that we probably did that when this great eruption, this great war happened, and that part of our punishment and actually our reward, I see what you mean by reward. In other words, we're giving a second chance. And so, yes, Stan Deo talks about, he's starting to come around to your thinking that this is like a courtroom and that the two bloodlines are here to play this thing out and saying, well, if you want your world, you really, even Jesus says that Satan is the god of this world. I mean, he comes right out and says it.
Right.
Even when Satan offered him all these kingdoms, if he would just kneel down before him, Jesus didn't dispute whether these great cities and these great kingdoms which he showed him were not his. So we're in this world, and so it has something to do with making a decision. Well, this is one thing, Zen, that I disagree, or I've got a conflict with you, and I'm coming more and more into the camp of reincarnation, because when I take a look at my life and the life of the average American, we live like kings. I mean, we really do. Compared to the rest of the world and what people in Africa and Asia have to go through. And so when I just see the condition that some of those people are born into, I can't help but to think, because I know, God doesn't create evil, and he didn't create this being to be born, in Somalia to basically be starved to death at 5 years old. And I'm starting to think, is there such thing as reincarnation? I mean, where does reincarnation come down in your book? Basically how you see it. What's this whole reincarnation about? And karma. Why is it fair that, a child is born on this earth and like Curtis Chapman, some Christian singer out there, I'm not sure if that's the right one, but they ended up running over their own child at 4 or 5 years old. So where does that nature of evil and karma and reincarnation, how do you deal with that? I mean, even what happened to you, being a quadriplegic. I mean, do you think, somehow, our lives have added to that? Or, I mean, go ahead. You see where I'm going.
These are really, really good questions, brother. And I want you to know that my 7th book is specifically about all of these topics that you just made mention of. In that book, I just did a 3-hour interview with Professor Truth on my 7th book, the 50 pages that I have yet done. I don't know when it'll be released, but I will be posting that in 1 week. And so you'll be able to get a lot of more detailed information about what you're asking, but I'll cover it quickly here. As far as reincarnation, reincarnation only exists for the fallen ones and those that take embodiment and possess the bodies and the forms of the royal elites that willingly give themselves through ritual and blood sacrifice, human sacrifice, to being openly possessed by these fallen angel beings. And it's the fallen angels that are reincarnating through lifetime and being, and not these elites as flesh body. They give up their personas. They give up their who they are individually to become hosts for these particular beings. But it's these Anunnaki. It's this hybrid race. You know, remember in the book of Enoch where it says that the giants that were born from the Nephilim, how after the flood they became disembodied spirits, that they had no part in salvation, so they would be as ghosts roaming, looking for bodies to possess and flesh to inhabit. Reincarnation only exists through the fallen ones. As far as us, humanity, the sons of God that are incarnated into the flesh now, we incarnate into the flesh once, as it says in Hebrews, it is given to man once to die and then judgment. We are here in the flesh now to determine, as I said, allegiance and to decide who it is that we want to serve and whether we are going to be part of the remnant or part of those that will be eradicated as if they had never existed. And your question as to why some are born in Somalia or some are born into poverty or some are born into Canaanite bloodlines or, you know, as part of the Illuminati families, this all goes to the point of election. And election is spoken about and explained in the Old Testament. It talks about how Esau, even before he was born, the father says that he had hated him. And nobody can explain this passage and understand how it is that the father can hate a child that had not yet even been born into the flesh. But it goes to election. And election has to do with those things that we did in our first world age embodiments as spiritual beings. And whether we took part in the war in heaven, or whether we fought on the side of Michael and the elect, or whether we were part of the Ophanim angels and made no determination one way or the other. And so it was that election and that determination that made decision for our flesh embodiments. And we also, before we incarnate into the flesh, we also choose. We choose the perfect circumstances for bringing us to where it is we want to be. And the remnant, the elect, are but a few. Many are called, but few are chosen, because few choose themselves. And that's the thing. And so how it is, you know, even myself with, you know, being a quadriplegic now, it was because of my accident. It was because of my becoming disabled that I was freed from all the lusts of the flesh and from all the focus on carnality and, you know, the physical, the world of the flesh and all that. I was free from that, and my focus was placed and my emphasis was placed on my spirituality and my, you know, because who would say, being a disabled person, that, you know, I can't even get myself up from laying down, and I need the assistance of others to do many things, but I know who I am in this flesh body. And even though my flesh body is broken, I know who I am because I have remembrance as to my first world age embodiment and my having been part of that first world age. And so those circumstances are what led me to my discernment and led me to being a servant, a foot washer unto humanity, and it's what brought me to discernment. And the same thing goes for each one of you out there. You are in the perfect circumstances for, even because a lot of people, we don't understand how it is, but many people come out of the worst and toughest situations to overcome and to become overcomers. We select those situations and the things that are going to happen to us in our lifetimes that are going to bring us to this remembrance. And that's what it's all about. But a lot of people care not and choose not to have anything to do with remembrance. Most people are totally okay with, living for the flesh and the pleasures of the flesh and the distractions of this world and the entertainment of this world, and won't make a decision one way or the other. This is the Laodicean church. And so that's where most people are, but that was your election as well. And so it's up to each one of you out there to come to remembrance and to empower yourself as to who you really are as a spiritual being living in a fallen state, in a fallen world. We find ourselves surrounded by devils and demons, because that's the reality of our situation. And the war in heaven is ongoing within our hearts and within our souls, within the temple of our flesh. The enmity between the bloodlines, the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, is the same war that occurred with the separation of light and darkness, with Yahushua, the Son of God, being crowned as as dominion over the creation, and Lucifer, rebellion and the war in heaven that occurred then. All that is being played out in the second world age here on this particular planet.
Well, listen, Zen, all I can say is that my wife had hip replacement, and I went to what I would call a house of horrors. And it was all kinds of special handicap equipment for everything from, getting out of bed to doing all kinds of stuff. And I just freaked out. I thought to myself, you know what? I am not this strong. This guy was in the wheelchair. He was a paraplegic, and it was his shop or whatever. And, I just had a really bad reaction. And I just thought, my God, I would kill myself just taking a look at some of the instruments or whatever. But, when I started really thinking about it, I realized only the strongest of men are in wheelchairs. When you see a guy in a wheelchair, you're looking at one of the strong men of the earth, not one of the weakest. If you only knew, just go to one of these places that have all these types of different equipment, and you realize that once you break with that, like you say, the flesh world. Okay, here we go. You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. You know about how to support us, so just go to freedomslips.com. There's a donate button. There's 4 or 5 other ways you can help us out. Please do so. This is edition 139 of Changing Reality, the most important things. That's what I try to traffic in. I am talking with Zen Garcia, who's just released his new book, Sons of God, Who We Are, Why We're Here. I think that's the subtitle. I keep messing that part up. But he's written numerous other books. I mean, this is about his 5th or 6th book. His previous book was Lucifer, the father of Cain, which created a firestorm within Christian circles. I can tell you that. That is the knowledge that was been locked out. But what I was saying before we went to break is that, Zen, I really appreciate you. And for some reason, a long, long time ago, I read a scripture in the Bible. The best thing to do, the best way to be a blessing to the church is to prophesy. So I kind of stuck my hand up. I don't know, I try to make the tryout, so to speak. Whether I did or not, I don't know. But with this knowledge, I think God said that, this knowledge is going to have to come out. But the person that I'm going to deliver this information to, you got to be incarnated on this earth, and you got to really go through hell. And so who's willing to do that? And I think, Zen, you got the crown. You put your hand up and says, I'll do it. And daggone if you didn't do it. You sacrificed a heck of a lot, and we just all appreciate it. I mean, I could never have comprehended the world that we live in without somebody like you and the teachings and the information that you have brought out. It was an impossibility for me to actually get this kind of information without somebody like you. So it is much appreciated for what you've done. And what I wanted to do this last segment, and I know a lot of people are listening right now, I wanted to talk a little bit about, and we're all seeing it, Zen. We're seeing it. We're not saying anything about it. We're all checking it out. But when we look at TV, we're starting to see anomalies among human beings that we have not seen before, that our eyes were not open to. We're seeing people with pupils that change, that actually look like cat eyes or reptilian snake-like eyes. And we're taking a look and saying, what the hell is that? You know, and we can see there's thousands and thousands. I mean, at will, I can go on to live TV bloopers and see all kinds of anomalies. And the three anomalies that I see, and I just wanted you to comment, what's really going on here? I see these reptilian type eyes, and then I see actual people that it seems like there's another dimensional being that's like in a fourth dimension that kind of phases in and out of their body. I see jagged teeth. I see hooded eyes. I see actual changes and patterns that come over their particular face. And then the third type that I see actual, I can only say, is it some kind of hologram? I mean, have these ancient demonic race, high tech, have they figured out how to cross over into our dimension and incarnate into flesh bodies like you would drive a car? I mean, what the hell's going on, Zen? I mean, we're all seeing these anomalies. So what do you say about what we're seeing? What are we seeing here?
This all goes back to what I was speaking about as far as the disembodied, the shapeshifters, the seraphim angels, the Draco reptilian shapeshifters. They are holding form. It speaks about this in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, which I cite, specifically in my book. They hold possession and rule over the councils of men through the royal elites who give themselves as host bodies. That at the highest levels of Satanism and Luciferianism, and this, the people are in all of the different vocations of the world. They're teachers, they're pastors, they're preachers, they're news anchors, they're news hosts. I mean, they're presidents, they're prime ministers, they're generals. That at the highest levels of Luciferianism and Satanism, they give themselves to be possessed as fit extensions for these particular beings. And it's spoken about how it is that these particular beings need to feed on the flesh and blood of humanity in order for them to be able to shift in and out of form and also to hold on to their disguise. There's been several, even Lady Diana, one of her friends, came out with a long, elaborate quote where she spoke about the Queen Mother as being this ancient lizard type being, a reptilian shapeshifter, and how it is that these elites, through blood ritual, how it is that they do all these things to become host bodies for these particular beings. And so now, yes, just like in the Series V, you are finding humans that are hosts for these particular beings, and they are everywhere. And it's because we are coming to the climax. It speaks about in Daniel where the iron would be mixed with the miry clay, speaking about these particular beings and how they would try to hold the form of men, how they would try to mingle themselves among the seed of humanity. And the word has all of the secrets. It's just a matter of having the discernment to unveil and to understand all of these things.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to that for a little bit. Particular people of the Canaanite bloodline. Now, as a Christian, my worldview, the way I see what Jesus did, he said he's a God of everlasting mercy and love, everlasting mercy. So, and I'm just seeing there's some of these people, and I don't want to name names, but there's people in the alternative truth movement. They're a radio host. They are, some are political, some are politicians, but they really do. You can see on their heart, they really do love God. They love their families, and they're doing the best that they can do. I mean, and yet they have some of these anomalies. I mean, can people of this particular bloodline, and I'm talking about some of these spiked-eyed people, can they become saved? I mean, did Jesus open up a way when he died on the cross for some way for them to make it back to God and their first estate? Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Christ died for all of us. Even at that point, it was only the Israelites, the Hebrews, that were drafted into the chosen people. But when Christ died on the cross, he extended salvation even unto the Gentile nations, which the Gentile nations are the pagan nations. They are the idolaters. They are the ones that worship these particular beings as their gods. And so, yes, even those that are born into these Illuminati families, we have so many of them now that have come out and that have given themselves and given their life to Christ and have had these demons driven out of them. There's many testimonies of all these ex-Illuminati people: John Todd, Arizona Wilder, Savali, Kathy O'Brien, different individuals that were born into these bloodlines that were mistreated, assaulted and abused ever since they were even young children, where they couldn't even understand. They were incorporated into satanic rituals, and they were committing blood sacrifices before they even, understood what was right and wrong, that their whole being was propagated to guide them to become servants of Lucifer. And these Canaanite bloodlines, this enmity, the seed of the serpent, they worship their father. Christ speaks about them as being those who say they are of Abraham's seed, but they seek to kill him. Those that are the Pharisees, he calls them vipers, because they are of this particular fallen angel, feathered serpent bloodline. And this feathered serpent that I speak about, that is the same as the Nakash of Genesis chapter 3, is the same feathered serpent that went to all of these different races and all of these different cultures and civilizations, and established blood ritual human sacrifice. And it's because the snake, the serpent, they feed off of that. And they need that to hold form and to come into being and to possess others. Those specifically that give themselves in ritual. But yeah, it's all spoken about in the Word. It's just veiled. Not many people are covering it. Most people are being set up for the strong delusion to accept these particular beings as our creators, as our benefactors, as those that created the human race. But as I cited earlier and as I explained earlier, it was the Father, Yahweh Elohim, as it describes in Genesis, not the Elohim. There's two different creations spoken about there. You have to have discernment in order to understand what is the difference. The Sumerians speak about this as the primitive worker and the civilized man. I bring all of this together in my books to help you to understand so that you can see through the illusion that is parading as reality.
Yeah, no question about it, Zen. That book, Sons of God, I would recommend everybody. You want the true reality? buy Zen's books. He's just giving you like 1.5% in this last 90, almost 102 minutes. He's just giving you he raced through it. I mean, he really did race through it. But one thing that I want to talk about before we close out, and then if anybody wants to call in at 347-688-2902, or go to Freedom Screen, and get a hold of Tones. Get the contact request for Tones, and he'll pull you in. But the last thing, really, Zen, I want to find out about is because we deal on the cutting edge, and in particular, my show, I try to game out where the world is right now, and from how I can read the tea leaves, and how they're trying to take the guns, stealing elections. I mean, they got a guy that's president that's probably not even an American. I mean, seem like they are just flat out for one world order. Considering a timeline, lay out what you think, how close we are to the end, and do you think that we're actually coming into Revelation, and that's sort of like in the days of Noah, because all these things are popping up everywhere, and we can see these sort of dimensional beings coming through people? Are we right at the end? I mean, how do you read things? Just kind of give us, what you see is coming, so to speak. Go ahead.
All right. Well, this has to do with Daniel's 70th week. And if you study a text, a video that Dewey Bruton put out on this Daniel's timeline, it will explain this, because everything aligns to what is a sign of Revelation 12. In Revelation 12, there's a sign, a great sign. It says a woman clothed in the sun with the moon beneath her feet, crown of 12 stars, and she has a child within her womb. This is a celestial phenomenon. And it's my opinion that we are already in tribulation, and that we are already nearing the midpoint where the Antichrist will soon be revealed, and the Antichrist will be revealed first before the second coming of Christ. That's part of the strong delusion. That's why the whole Ancient Aliens series is out there and being pumped and run marathon fashion, and why they have all these different guys up there saying that, the ancient aliens are our creators. They created humanity. There's even numerous Christian scholars who also cite the same thing, because they too, it says that even the most elect would be deceived if it were possible. And so this strong delusion is being established everywhere. But going back to the sign of Revelation 12, you can look this up in a program called Stellarium, that on September 23rd, on the Feast of Trumpets, 2017, this sign will be fulfilled. Now, whether this is the end of days, the day of the Lord, the last trump, the last day, we don't know. All we know is that that particular day is going to be significant. And according to Dewey Bruton and his Daniel's timeline, it is the fulfillment of the 120th Jubilee, and also it's a sabbatical week. It's also fulfilling the Feast of Trumpets. And Christ, when he came into the flesh the first time, he fulfilled the spring feast. He fulfilled all of the early feasts. And those of the fall feasts are yet to be fulfilled. And you'd have to really be a student of all the feast days, of, going back and looking at the calendar, both the Jewish and the Gregorian calendar, and how they all line up in order to understand this. Another thing, that over the period of 2014 and 2015, on the Jewish, on the Hebraic feast days, Passover, the different Feasts of the Trumpets, the Day of Atonement, all these different things are going to be fulfilled with signs and wonders, in that there will be, as it states in Revelation, the sign, the moon will be blood red, and the sun will also be darkened. All these things occur on these particular feast days, and there's going to be many signs in the heavens over the next few years. And it's my opinion that we're already halfway into tribulation, and that the New World Order is being primed, that all they need is one major cataclysm to start the dominoes falling, just like 9/11 when they called for a new Pearl Harbor. We know that the trigger is Iran and Syria. And even today, there was news released about how one of the Iranian nuclear facilities was destroyed. There was a covert, something covert against it that took it out. And so the war is already on. It's just a matter of when it becomes full-fledged and open. We even have videos released of Russia, and this has just gone viral, about how the Russian Air Force is training. They're flying right over, real low, right over their highways and their interstates in their own country. They are preparing. They are already doing exercises to prepare. Russia's already doing the long-range bomber runs. We have the Chinese popping up submarines right behind our aircraft carriers. America is being set up to fall. And the reason that is because you cannot have a strong country like ours, or like it used to be, in the way of the establishment of the New World Order and global government. All of the nations of the world have to be brought to their knees in order for us to accept global rule through the United Nations, which is what is being pushed. That's why the financial collapse and the theft of the monetary system, and it's being, a house of cards now with everybody realizing it, why everybody's buying silver and gold. All of these things are part of the fulfillment of prophecies that are coming into play.
Okay, so well, listen real quick. We got a caller, and Jer, go ahead and ask your question real quick, and then I want to save a little time so everybody can get a pen and piece of paper to find out where you can get Zen's work, where you can hear him teach, about his books, his websites. All I want to say this, because I don't want to run out of time, and I don't want to get emotional either. But Zen, I've been on the political battlefield for a long time. I know you don't know anything about me or whatever, my history, but I've done a lot of killing. I'm talking about in the spiritual realm. And I've asked God many times to, I want to meet my match. I want to meet somebody greater than me. I want to meet somebody more powerful than me. And I've snapped big guys' necks. I've done a lot of killing. And all I can say, Zen, is that you are a greater man than me. And thank God for putting your hand up and going through the life you had to go through to be able to get these revelations and to cross over. Anyways, Jared, go ahead real quick. I'm going to mute. Here, go.
I'd like to say thank you for coming, Zen, and it's a blessing to listen to you. My name is Jared Barrow. I help out around here as the janitor.
You even consider irrelevant and maybe not seemingly connected to the case, but that might be important later. And so I see truth as a big jigsaw puzzle that needs to be filled in with certain pieces, and that once you get enough of the pieces, you can kind of see the underlying truth and the picture that is veiled, and then you get a discernment, and it helps you to decipher the illusion, so to speak, and to see through the matrix. But so for the first few years, I was traveling around. I taught martial arts, and so I would stop in different dojos and studios wherever I went to train with the people and to also teach them. And I was studying under a guy named Charles Fears, who was the bodyguard for Emmanuel Lewis, the Little Webster, the guy Little Webster on TV. But anyways, he had two bodyguards, Charles Fears and Vernon Davis, and both of them were my trainers. And then when I went out to the West Coast, I started to get involved in snowboarding, and so I started to teach snowboarding and martial arts, and then I got involved with the Gracie brothers before the time of the Ultimate Fighting Championships and all that came out. And so my focus was writing poetry, teaching martial arts, and also just snowboarding. And so I ended up spending my winters in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which was an incredibly beautiful place and very inspirational. And it was during the time of all these travels and spending this 4 years, living out of this van and going to different places that I really got grounded with being alone and being with spirit. And I didn't at that time have, a job that I needed to be at, or I didn't have, this was before cell phones, there was actually beepers there during that time, but I didn't carry one of those, and nobody knew where I was at. And I would always call in and check in with my parents and let them know where I was and how to, where I was going so that they could feel more comfortable and not be fearful for my, looking out the window. And I got tired of, just doing the normal 9 to 5 kind of thing. So I decided at an early age to hit the road and kind of live in a van for a period of time and to travel and to seek out some spiritual awakening and to seek experiences of the divine, so to speak. So I, for a period of time, after I published my first book, which was in 1992, that one was called Look Somewhere Different, I decided to travel and to leave and to, move to different places. And I spent 4 years in this van, and I wrote my second and my third book during that period of time while I was seeking out just wisdom and vision questing at different national parks. And during that time, I didn't have a job. I had income coming in from having sold my vehicle. I had a Jeep Wrangler at that time, and I was working a really good job before then, installing telephone networks and computer patch panels and faxes and telexes and things like that for my father, who had a company that he wanted me to basically take over, but that wasn't
were you Zen? Were you a Christian at the time?
No, I wasn't.
Okay,
I was
go ahead.
More involved in shamanism and the New Age and vision questing and doing things from a completely different perspective. And I was also involved in studying the Sumerian text and Zachariah Sitchin's work, and a lot of what was coming out, Barbara Messiniak and Bringers of the Dawn, Red Elk, all the different, like Hopi prophecies and things like that. Because back in the early 90s, there was a flood of information that was coming forth, and I basically was seeking, and I wanted to know, so I was consuming everything, same as I did when the Father finally did bring me to the scriptures, and I study everything voraciously and read everything, because I feel like with truth, it's like being a criminal investigator. You have to study all of the pieces, those things which my travels, but after a while they became comfortable with what I was doing. But during the course of my travels, after I published my second book, When the Evening Dies, which is a poetry book about all of my travels and my spiritual journeys during that time, it was in 1994 that I was going to a massage school. Actually, it was a healing arts school in Northern California in Garberville called the Heartwood Institute for Healing Arts. And this place was really kind of just a bunch of hippies that had decided to start a school, and they were teaching all of their different expertise. And one of those was Swedish Echelon, deep tissue, polarity, and shiatsu. And so I became involved with doing massage as well, and that was one of the things that I would also do to supplement my income as far as teaching martial arts and snowboarding and all these things. And then while I was at that school, it was we were going to San Francisco because Garberville's 200 miles north of San Francisco, and I was actually hitchhiking with a friend down to San Francisco. We were going to actually go visit and watch a Grateful Dead show, visit some friends down there, and go to a series of 3 Grateful Dead shows. And it was during that trip that we lost our brakes on a mountain road and went off a cliff. And luckily, somebody was actually spotted us and reported us going off of this cliff. And so the emergency workers came out and saved us. We actually dropped 85 feet. We hit a tree about 65 feet on the way down, and it slowed our impact enough that that we didn't explode on impact. And I don't know how long it was that we were down there. I do remember losing our brakes, and then the guy that was actually driving, he tried to hold the vehicle on the road, which didn't make sense to me. I would have crashed it into the mountain immediately to slow our descent, but he tried to hold it on the road until we shot sideways. We gained enough speed and went around the corner, and he couldn't control the vehicle, and we.
Okay, let's rock and roll. You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We are the largest non-commercial worldwide internet radio station on the planet. It's Midnight Madness and Changing Reality, the most important things. This is edition 140. The most important things. Did you hear what I said? So you want real reality tonight? I mean, I'm talking real reality. You want the truth? Well, you're going to get the truth tonight. Let me just date stamp this. This is January the 30th, about 2 minutes into the new day, the year of our Lord 2013. And there has been a raging civil war going on among people about what's going on with these aliens and these UFO abductions and these sightings. Millions of people all over the place, millions and millions have said they've been abducted. Something like 500 million, when they poll worldwide, said they have seen UFOs in the sky. Well, I'm going to bring you a guest tonight who's going to give you the true reality. I have searched for 25 years looking for the truth. And somebody that will just tell you straight up and put the pieces to the puzzle together. You want to know about the war in heaven? You want to know about the fall? What are those strange structures on Mars? How our planet got here? Atlantis? You want all the pieces to the puzzle? Well, my guest, who is a teacher, he's an author, he's written numerous books, but most importantly, he's a real disciple of Jesus Christ. Not one of these fake Christians that, smile, praise God, and just don't hardly even talk to you or engage the world around them, sort of in their own little bubble. You know what I'm talking about. I used to be one of those sort of pop Christianity, American Christianity type Christians. Well, my guest tonight is none other than Zen Garcia, author of both Lucifer, the Father of Cain, and the Sons of God, who we are and why we're here. And so what I wanted to do, Zen, I'm just excited to have you. I'm just really happy to have you. It's just an honor to meet you. I watch all your work. I listen to all your work on YouTube, on Freedom Endeavor, where you put up various clips, hour, sometimes 2 hours, sometimes longer, where you go over all this material. And just thanks for coming tonight. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's an honor to be with you, brother, and it's my pleasure. And these are very important issues, and you're right. There are so many people that are, being set up for what is cited in the Bible as the strong delusion, and that has to do with people being willing to accept these aliens, these ancient aliens, which we know are demons and fallen angels, as their creators and as their benefactors and as the creators of humanity. And so it says that even the most elect could be deceived if it were possible.
Yeah, I mean, we're in this civil war has even spilt over into this station to where we got bitter disagreements among our own host. There seem to be either on one side or the other. But before we go into the fall and everything, this first segment, Zen, because you're such an unusual person, I mean, if it wasn't for you putting the pieces to the puzzle together, I would have like one piece over here, and then I'd get this, and I couldn't match them. And it wasn't really until I got a hold of your work and started listening to you that I saw the whole matrix. And I kind of wondered why. And so you're just an unusual person. You have an unusual first name, unusual background. So if you can kind of tell the audience where you came from and how you came to be able to get all of this really esoteric, really high knowledge that's literally forbidden. It's very hard to find. It's the biggest secret, so to speak. But can you just say a little bit about your life and what happened to you, and how you had an accident and things changed for you, and where you came from, that type of thing?
Sure, absolutely. Well, when I was going to college and also holding a 9-to-5 job, I found myself always, in a vehicle, traveling from place to place, and then going either into college or into a martial arts studio or into work where I was always behind the walls. And